butch in the concrete, courthouse tan and BIs, slouch your falling arches, purges truth into great lies, rewrites every story, every goal that ever was, eliminates incompetence, those who break their laws. You say you got the answers, we'll ask you anyway. Everything maybe was meant to be this way. Don't try to fool us, we know the worst is yet to come. 'Cause I believe my kingdom will come. Heifers were fighting, ours were red, ancestors' bodies and battles they shed. He will elect him, he will eject you from the land of the free and the home of the brave. See for you're tired, all you're sure, and this remains, you know what that cures. This spells of freedom means nothing to me, as long as there's a freedom I say. Heifers were fighting, ours were red, ancestors' bodies and battles they shed. He will elect him, he will eject him from the land of the free and the home of the brave. See for you're tired, all your own sure, and it's for money, and you know what that cures. This spells of freedom means nothing to me, as long as there's a PMSA. Alright, so I fucked that up a little bit, but anyway. So very cool thing to talk about today is the Megadeth E-pedal. Right? Key songwriting thing here because he uses that a lot. Right? He uses that in basically like from the first 3 or 4 albums, right? Almost, he uses that device. I like to think about it as like a songwriting device, right? He uses that probably at least 2 or 3 songs on an album, right? Like Peace Sells, right? So I just call that the E-pedal, which is what he calls it, and then you just sing over it. So when you have the vocals, so I'm going to use this to create my own kind of Megadeth song here. I might use this device, I don't know. I think about it as a, kind of a device, you know what I mean? That you can just be like, okay, I'm going to sing over this. So, for example, he uses this. For hook and mouth, he uses this. Right? So he's singing over this. Right? Same thing with like Liar. He'll do the same kind of, he'll do this, but then the notes will be different here. Right? I can't remember it exactly. And then it's like Peace Sells, right? Right? So you get the same sort of thing to where that is like classic Dave Mustaine, to where, like I said, he sings on the E-pedal. Even on many of the songs from later, right, he'll sing on the E-pedal. Same thing like, and I'm not saying he invented it, but it's a very popular device that he uses. Same thing with like Seek and Destroy, right? You kind of sing on that, right, as you're pedaling on this. So I just thought that's a cool songwriting thing to talk about because none of the previous bands does it. Iron Maiden doesn't do it too much. All these other bands don't do it. So that's like a Thrash staple, basically. And then Mustaine uses this as much as he possibly could, I think. As much as he can get away with. Probably like 2 or 3 songs on an album. Especially like, the first 4 albums, right? To where he's just singing over this. And the cool thing is you can borrow that. Because, the E-pedal is just, he didn't invent it. Nobody invented it. So you could sing over this. Right? So for the Liar one, I think he does something like this, right? I'm trying to remember it. Right, something like that. I can't remember it exactly. But the lesson here is, it may seem like, whoa, isn't that just obvious? No, what I'm saying is I'm pointing it out that it is a songwriting device that he uses all the time. So that's pretty much it. I just wanted to, play it and then be like, okay, it's a very songwriting device that he just basically just sings on. You can borrow that. You can borrow it and be like, and then even here, when he sings over the, so even when he sings over that, there's a little bit of that E pedal, right? So I'm going to use it on my own, maybe. And the thing is that a lot of the songwriting, right, it's not like, it's very modular in the sense of, remember I made the statement that, it all kind of sounds the same, but then it's the way you put it together. So once you get to thrash, because, think about rock and roll as like stages, right? You get like very unique sort of riffs. And then as time progresses, it starts kind of sounding similar, right? It starts sounding similar. If you look at something like Iron Maiden, when it came out for that time, if you look at Number of the Beast, right? It's kind of phenomenal to where it's like the whole thing is heavy. The whole thing is this, right? I remember a friend who... I played him Somewhere in Time, and then he couldn't tell one song from the other. Although you and I can be like, oh wait, dude, each song is its own island, right? But to the casual listener, it just all sounds the same. It just so as metal got faster and faster, these sort of reusable bits got to be the same. So that's why I said like Megadeth stuff, right? It's really like it's very modular in the sense that it's more rhythmic. It's more rhythmic than anything, so you can kind of mix and match these riffs, even if they're different key, and sometimes they kind of just work together. They just sort of work together. So that's the cool thing here, is that this is more rhythmic than anything else. So hence you can just reuse a part like this and sing over it on your own song. I don't want to come up with something because, I don't want to, do that right now. But I don't know if I'll borrow that exactly because, it's going to sound very much like Megadeth. So borrow is not the right word here. What it is it's a building block, right? It's a building block to where you can sing over it. Or he'll do the E pedal even for like harmonies, right? Even for like, right? He's just pedaling on the E. That's just pretty much a staple in bread and butter, right? He'll pedal on the E, and then he'll hit notes on the other strings, right? In the 4th string and the 5th string, and then he'll just pedal on the E. That's classic. I just kind of got carried away and played that. But like I said, very much in that song, the verse riff is just, right? Same thing we're talking about, that E pedal. So in Peace Sells, like I said, it's that song, uses that E pedal. It's kind of like a staple in the sense that it's something that you can kind of fall back on if you can't think of anything else. And since it's a songwriting device, right? Much like a chord progression that you can borrow. You can just borrow that bit, right? Exodus uses it, you know. This almost sounds kind of Exodus-y, right? And then, of course, the Metallica has that same part in Ride the Lightning, right? And, you know, maybe Mustaine came up with this and then they borrowed it from him. I don't know. Who knows? But it sounds like that Exodus-y, Megadeth, Metallica. You don't know who kind of came up with this. Probably Diamond Head, you know, probably had something to do with it. But this is a very familiar. See how, like, I just pointed out 3 songs that use it from 3 different bands. So you could use it, right? So this is Metallica, right? And then Hook and Mouth is kind of the same thing, with just a little bit extra bits of. Right? So I just pointed out to you where these reusable blocks are very kind of similar. So once you get to Thrash, which is to where it all kind of sounds the same a little bit, so you can mix and match these parts. Right? No one's going to come up to you and then say, look, that's Metallica and that's it. You can't reuse it. Because even Metallica can't claim that. Because that's, you know, they probably got it from somewhere else. They probably got it from Diamond Head or Blitzkrieg or somewhere else, right? So you can use, so Thrash is basically reduced to these fundamental units. And it's just like how you put them together. That's all it is. It's just how you put them together. And then that becomes a song. If you look at a lot of Megadeth songs, right, it's kind of the same patterns over and over again, but just kind of, you know, put together in a different way. And a lot of songwriting is like that. Like I said, as we get faster and faster, it becomes more apparent that, oh, wait, that's all it is. It's just kind of, you know, right? You're just kind of reusing these blocks over and over again. But Mustaine does it in a way where it's interesting and it sounds unique, right? It sounds different. It doesn't all sound the same. It sounds different and sort of unique, right? Metallica used this a lot in the first, you know, the first album. And then also, like, you know, if you go to, like, I guess if we go in the key of A, right? So we just move that E pedal to different things. That pedal, that's like the fundamental unit of, you know, metal and thrash, right? More towards thrash. Right? I mean, you can hear it, right, in 22 Acacia Avenue, a little bit. Right. So same sort of thing. So people, you know, kind of discover new ways to use old stuff in a different way. Right? Iron Maiden would have never just used this and just sang over that. But then the thrash guys that became the kind of the staple to where, you know, Exodus, the same thing, right? You can probably hear 2 or 3 Exodus songs per album that uses that kind of that pedal. So even for like melodies, you can use that. It's like a pedal to where that's kind of like your home, you know, you always come back to it. Or even with like, this is a really cool riff. I'll cover this maybe in another time, but. So that would be an example of like a pedal with a melody on top. So this is when Sweating Bullets, right? So there's not much difference between that and, right? I mean, of course, it sounds melodically different, but it's the same kind of structure to where you play a melody and these notes, you bring it out. Remember, go back to the first video. Which notes do you palm me? Which notes do you bring out? Right? And then it's just like, so you let that note ring out. Alright, so anyway, none of these parts I'm playing exactly, but I just thought that that's something, it just kind of stands out because it's like the same kind of motif. You can think about it as a motif, a pattern, right? A device. I use these terms interchangeably. So to where you're just like, okay, I'll write a song where we pedal on E and I'll sing over that. Right? So, or I'll just put a melody like this, right? Right? There's another example. Right? So, lots of examples. I guess in a lot of ways you can say that is pretty much the fundamental unit of thrash. Right? I know I've said this is the fundamental unit of thrash, that really fast picking. Right? So if you slow that down, you get this thing. So anyway, I don't know. I just thought it's cool to talk about it because it's not only used in multiple songs across multiple bands, but it's also used whenever there's a melody there. So it's just kind of the staple go-to thing to where it's like this E string is the kind of the bottom end of it, and then you hit that. And then you play like a melodic component on top, almost like you know how like you have like when you play piano. That's one thing I can't play is a piano, because I just can't wrap my mind around it. I can play the guitar, I can play the bass, I can play like a couple other instruments, but the piano, I wish I could play it. But because one hand is the bass clef, the other is the treble clef, and each one is doing independently two different things. It's like you need two different brains. This is kind of like that, to where the notes that you ring out on these strings, right? That's kind of like the treble clef. And then this stuff, it's kind of like the bass clef almost. Just the way I think about it. And then you get something like this. So, it's kind of cool to where, and like I said, it doesn't have to be E. It can be an A, or it can be in, like other sort of things. But the kind of the fundamental staple of that, it's just that repetitive kind of that eighth note, if you want to slow it down that much. Right? That kind of repetitive pattern, which is just kind of like, okay, most of the song is like that. Anyway, just wanted to talk about that concept, the pedaling of the notes. Not that this is a lesson or, I'm trying to, be a teacher or anything like that, but just kind of cool. Also, I'm going to do a Megadeth song and it's going to be released here. So, anybody that likes Megadeth might like that. So, if you want to see these kind of concepts put into action, watch for this channel and I'll put out a song on here. I still haven't decided the band name yet. I might just do a few bars like a demo and then just say coming, right? You know what I mean? Because it takes forever to do this. And then I don't want to do it if no one gives a shit. So now that I got the Marshall, cabinet, right? And then this sounds pretty good. I mean, this is enough for what we want to do. Right? So watch out for that. And then on a side note, I'll probably go jam with a band on Wednesday, and then I'll post some videos where I sing with the Sabbath band. All right?